Welcome everyone to this exempt, Seaford, not exempt, sorry, extraordinary even, if you give it with E, we're there. Extraordinary Seaford Town Council full agenda, full council meeting on Thursday the 12th of December. Obviously very close to Christmas, everyone. Okay, so thank you to all members of the public, councillors and officers who are joining us for today's meeting. Councillors and officers are reminded of their commitment to the Civility and Respect Pledge and to be mindful of this during tonight's meeting. Please be aware that the Council is video recording this meeting and this will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. I would just like to highlight some key points of the meeting format. Please can I ask everyone to have their phones turned off or set to silent? Russell. The fire exits are via the doors out of the main chambers and down the external fire estate stairs or via the main entrance that you enter the building through. In the event of a fire, the lift should not be used. The assembly point is to outside the Royal Mail Parcel Office on West Street. Please remain seated unless you're invited to speak or need to take a comfort break. The toilet facilities are out in the corridor you enter through. Members of the public are invited to participate in the meeting with the key points as follows. Public participation is limited to a maximum of 4 minutes per person. As chair, I will interject if I need to enforce this. When the public participation agenda item is introduced, please raise your hand to show you wish to speak and I will invite you to speak. If you are comfortable standing, please do so to ensure you can be heard across the room. You do not need to state your name when you start speaking if you do not wish to. I would ask that participants looking to leave the meeting, wait until the end of an agenda item to limit distractions to other participants. A member of the public looking to leave the building will need to be escorted out by a council officer. If the meeting goes into confidential session, a short 2-minute break will be held to allow members of the public to leave. To all present, please remember to show respect to others in the meeting and avoid interrupting where possible to enable others to follow the meeting. If any councillor feels concerned about any aspect of the meeting or discussion, please clearly state point of order. I will then gesture for you to elaborate. If anyone present is felt to be behaving unacceptably, they can be ejected from the meeting by resolution. Thank you for listening. On behalf of the council, I would like to thank everyone for attending this town council meeting. Okay, so we're going to go to agenda item 1, apologies.
Thank you, Chair.
Clark.
We have apologies from Councillor Ruth Sturton for personal commitments, Councillor Wearmouth for personal commitments, Councillor Adeniji for prior commitment, Councillor Lord because he's unwell, Councillor Horu because he's unwell, Councillor Meek from a prior commitment, and possibly Councillor Buchanan for a personal commitment. But that's to be confirmed.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I should probably have notified you in advance, but due to a family commitment, I will have to leave a few minutes before 9:30 if we're still going.
Thank you very much for letting us know. That's okay. Thank you everyone. Agenda item 2, disclosure of interest. To deal with any disclosure by members of any disclosable pecuniary interest and interests other than pecuniary interest as defined under the Seaford Town Council Code of Conduct and the Localism Act 2011 in relation to matters on the agenda. Do I have any councillors have an interest to disclose this? Councillor Bourne.
Thank you. Agenda item 10, so I'll be leaving prior to that.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us know. If at any point in the meeting a councillor feels that they may have an interest to disclose, please raise this straight away and officers can provide advice. Okay, thank you. Petitions in accordance with the Town Council Petitions Policy. This is a standard agenda item. Oh, I've gone over. Oh, I'm so sorry. I've skipped. Public participation. To deal with any questions or brief representations from members of the public in accordance with relevant legislation and Seaford Town Council policy. If any members of the public are looking to speak, please be reminded you have a maximum of 4 minutes and to avoid repeating comments made by others. Thank you very much.
Good evening everybody, or everyone, Madam Mayor, Sylvia Gunn. I am hoping that everyone's had a chance to read the email that Georgia kindly sent out on my behalf. I'd like to refer to agenda item 5, the committee structure, on page 12. Whilst I welcome this agenda item, I do have concerns regarding community services. For me personally, community services is integral to the foundation of the council, as Seaford Town Council has an immense amount of land and assets, bringing in much needed revenue. In my honest opinion, the present recommendations for community services will over time confuse issues and become time consuming for councillors. Please can I make the following recommendations for you at least to consider. Number 1, having a separate committee for Seaford Head Estate. It's a very large area, includes the golf course, the farmland, the nature reserve, Southfield Barn, Hope Rat, and goes as far down as the Cutmere, which must be viewed as a whole. All other spaces, all other open spaces, including the commercial assets, I would like to recommend that they stay within community services. So that covers that. So regarding the same agenda item at page 8, where it states at 3.5, this time limited debate, it says, full council will hold a time limited debate and pass a resolution. 2 rules in standing orders that cover this is section 1, rules of debate, which is U and Y. I feel there needs to be more clarity on this item. Is it time limit on councillors or the debate as a whole? Furthermore, any changes that take place from your approval will have to be reflected in standing orders. For me, standing orders is the management of meetings for all councillors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, no other participation, so we'll now move on to petitions. In accordance with the Town Council petitions policy, this is a standard agenda item to facilitate any public petitions being presented to and noted by full council. Please note that this would not prompt discussion on the petition at this meeting. None have been received by officers. Are there any members of the public wishing to submit a petition at this stage? Thank you very much. Okay. So we're going to move on to agenda item 5, which is the committee structure proposals. And this is going to be this is to present proposed changes to the Town Council's committee structure, and I'm going to hand over to our interim town clerk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So hopefully you've all had a chance to read and digest the committee structure proposals that have been put forward. I don't intend to read through the report, but I welcome any questions that you have.
Okay, Councillor Richard Taylor, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Personally, I don't like the way community services has been split. I think it should be done on area-wise as opposed to looking at open spaces in the buildings. I mean, when you put seafront as, for example, open space, I don't really classify it as open space. It's not an open space in that sense. A space, depends what you mean by space, and I don't think that's necessarily clear. The green spaces or places generally. I do agree with what former councillor have done in the sense of her confused about the splitting of community services, and I personally don't feel as though this will actually work long term, and I don't like the way it's done. I think because you've got the remnants of the Gulf there, you feel as though obliged to sort of link it with there. Also, I don't like the way the climate change emergency put where it is, because the items of climate change could affect all the committees throughout the whole lot. So I think in a way that should be, it's almost as though the climate change should be included every agenda item throughout the whole of the committee structures anyway, and not desperately separate that out as such. I think that could be included more generically and included. So there's a couple of opening points for now anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did you
If I may come back on that,
respond before anyone else questions? Thanks.
It was difficult to come to where we proposed community services, how community services should be split. The feedback that we've received was that community services has a unwieldy agenda that many meetings go on until past 10 o'clock, and so standing orders have to be suspended, and that there was too much to debate, and that quite often things that were really important were at the end because there was so much to get through. And so I started out by trying to work out how best to split it in a way that seemed to split it equally. And it's difficult to know where to draw that line. Obviously, it's just a proposal and it's subject to councillors' recommendations and potential amendments. But the idea was that we could, because golf is effectively, the golf course is effectively an open space, and the golf course is an important asset of the town council. That was why I decided to split it as I did in the proposals. And then obviously assets, so in terms of buildings and that sort of thing, separate. That's not to say that it can't be split in a different way. And I think, there's been some discussion about whether or not we should trial this for a year, see if it works, get some feedback, monitor it, and then maybe look to split it a different way in the future if it doesn't work. But obviously it's for council, it's for councillors more than I. It was just a starting proposal, really.
I don't know, obviously council wants to be, can I come back at some stage, Madam Mayor?
Yes, you can.
On a different item.
Yes, okay, thank you. Councillor Bristol and then Councillor.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not going to make a...
Stand up.
Sorry. Yeah. My legs haven't been working for about 3 days, but here we go. Right, so, now I appreciate that we haven't had a chance to sort of discuss in any great depth, obviously me with my Chair of Climate Change hat, about how that might work and fit in. That's partly down to I had a block of availability issues and I didn't attend the particular meeting that time spanned over. I'm very much in two minds at the moment. I can see the rationale for putting it like we have in many ways, particularly putting a lot of the open spaces, Seaford Head and the golf course together with what we've got coming up in terms of the South Hill Barn project, the pressures on that area in general due to increased traffic and tourism and so on and so on, National Nature Reserve stuff. But I'm also mindful of the goals of the goals of climate change, particularly the one where we want to incorporate a sorry, bear with me, I'm on day 3 of migraine. That we want to incorporate the environmental implications section as we do with financial implications into our reports, and we want to start thinking environmentally with everything that we do, and of course I know we already do that to an extent. So when I sort of zoom out and I start looking at other councils and how they've structured things and their responses to the climate emergency where they've so declared one, the first thing I'd say is that whilst climate change has served quite well so far in terms of the name, I'd be really inclined to change that to climate action now, just because it takes any dialogue away from climate change, and it's kind of what are we doing to achieve our goals and act on things. It's more, in terms of behaviour change, it's a much better phrase and it's commensurate with sort of national terminology. But that aside, the Finance and General Purposes Committee to me is the closest that we have here, you may or may not agree, to essentially an audit and sort of governance committee. And I'm thinking that if we want to start integrating environmental decision making into everything that we do, that perhaps the climate change element would actually sit best there, certainly for the time being, because we could then put in those pan-council measures and it could be sort of debated by, sort of with that kind of scrutiny hat on rather than on a project by project basis. So I'm kind of in two minds at the moment about which way to try it first, if you like. And I'm keen to hear everybody else's views. I wanted to throw that out there for now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Briscoe. Councillor Barr, and then Councillor Sturton.
Thank you. I'm quite happy to see climate action going there, and that should really be a golden thread through everything that we do. But my comment was that the commercial aspects of the items that you've got in the golf section, such as the coffee shop at South Hill Bound, the cafe at the Soles. That should remain with assets and with the other commercial aspects of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Skirton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So around 1983 or 1984, the New Zealand Treasury came up with a plan for the reorganisation of New Zealand's government. Rather than having a Department of Education dealing with schools and a Treasury dealing with money and the Department of Environment dealing with environmental matters and the Ministry for Women dealing with equality, sort of promoting things, they said, let's have government departments deal not with portfolios but with values. So let's have the Treasury being concerned with making things more efficient and cost effective, and let's have the Department of the Environment being concerned that everything is environmentally sound and so on. And there's a reason why those proposals went nowhere, interesting though they were. I think it's important to have well-defined functional portfolio areas. I don't envy the interim town clerk. This is always going to be a bit of a messy affair around the edges, and maybe accepting a little bit of that is the price that we have to pay for progress and something that works and can be worked in the short terms. And I certainly commend the spirit of experimentation and trial and error that seems to inform these proposals. There's nothing we can't back off from in a year if it's not working out. If there are some rough edges, we can smooth them over. What I would say, I can sort of see the split between assets and facilities and golf, open spaces and climate change, but there are a couple of things to regret, and I just wonder how we might not back off from what's proposed, but build in or minimise the regret, if I could put it that way. One of the things I would really love to see is a comprehensive strategic approach to assets and to the management of assets in this council. I've observed in my time as being a councillor just the volume of business that could be called asset management, and I haven't done a proper audit, but I would say it's upwards of 50%. And we have an assets and facilities committee, but we are kind of hiving off one of our most valuable assets, the golf course. Maybe that's inevitable, maybe that has to be the case, but I just want to point out that issue and be mindful of perhaps the need for cross-working between committees that this will create, and the need to build in opportunities from that. That would be one option. The contribution from the public from a former councillor was we would need we would benefit from a committee responsible for the Seaford Head Estate. It seems to me that more or less what's now called golf, open spaces and climate change really covers a lot of that, and that with some very small tweaking of the proposals could actually be a committee that had full responsibility for all of Seaford Head Estate, including matters related to the golf course, including matters related to the emerging National Nature Reserve, and would incorporate a lot of the action we would have on the matter of climate action. So I think, I suppose in conclusion, I think these are good proposals. I think reorganisation always creates rough edges, and I think we need to be aware of that and mindful of it. But I mean, I would with those suggestions that will not actually turn into motions unless anyone else wants to do it, I would commend this report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sturton.
Can I come back?
Yes, you come back and then I'll take.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to make the point that 3.6 on the report does mention the fact that the areas of responsibility that are highlighted in the appendix are subject to, potential amendment as and when councillors see fit. And the idea is that it's a list that's indicative of what would be included in each of those committees. So there's obviously flexibility about certain things could be moved from one to the other.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I welcome this paper. I am amazed at how many meetings we have, how many papers we have to read. Surely that means that we can't properly attend to things in depth because we're skating over the surface, trying to cover everything. And we've got to think about how we do this differently. So I strongly welcome that, and it will be an attempt, and I'll call it an attempt, a positive attempt. It's not, I welcome this attempt to try and sort out or reflect on what we are doing and why we're doing it. And bearing in mind, we can only manage so much. I endorse what you're saying, Councillor Sturton, in terms of, there are many ways to cut this cake, and we could spend the whole evening talking about how to do that, but it's not going to get us much further forward. My feeling is twofold. That, first of all, I'm conscious we've had some key people not here tonight, particularly Maggie Wearmouth, who is, she's with her family away, not in the area. And I think because she's chair of community services, it's important that she's here for this discussion. And my suggestion is that as a way of moving forward, I'm grateful that I'm not a chair, and I'm grateful that I have an opportunity to comment from not being a chair. But I actually think this is now, to move it forward, I would suggest it's in the hands of the chairs with yourself and the deputy to decide then, are we going to progress this or not?
Okay,
does that make sense?
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. In my reading, it makes some sense, but it means that you've offered an amendment to the proposal.
Well,
and I'm not, because you'd have to delegate responsibility to the chairs, so we'd have to rethink that. Yeah,
CCMG doesn't have any powers to
We
make
don't,
decisions.
yeah.
No, there's no powers, there's no
So
decision.
unless it was delegated to
Yeah.
CCMG to make that decision, that's the only way.
No, we can't.
okay, I mean, what I'm trying to yes, I get that.
That's not to say it couldn't be discussed further at CCMG and then it brought back to the 23rd of January full council, if that was what was wanted.
Thank you. Are there any more comments? Councillor Gorman?
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this paper too. I do agree with some of the comments that we've received from fellow councillors. We do know that community services for a very long time has been a very long and very intense meetings because of the amount that is in there, and we have needed to split it down. And as Councillor Taylor said, you could cut the cake many ways of how you're going to sort it out, but with the golf course and the open spaces and things, I think this possibly is the right way to go. I would say that I wouldn't include the on-site facilities at the Salts and the Crouch and things, so like the concessions should be discussed with the assets, and because that's where they're discussing concessions, that's where they're discussing public toilets. Otherwise you've got to then get an agreement with the other committees, and that could be a bit too much of an overlap. So that's the only thing I would bring the toilets and the concessions from the open spaces back into the assets and facilities. And let's trial that for a year, because we might find one is working less than what the other committee is, or it could actually be the right balance. And until we trial something, we're not going to know how effective it's going to be. But I think it actually is what is needed at this precise moment in time.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Foreman. Do we have any questions? I'm going to go to Councillor Matthews first and then Jessica.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Clark, I thought it was a really helpful document actually, and I thought it was really poignant to kind of see how, by reducing the amount of committees and meetings, what difference there was in terms of volume of meetings just for the officers to attend. So I think that was positive. In terms of I'm on the Climate Change Committee. In terms of my thoughts on that, I think I'm in agreement with Councillor Foreman in regards to the concessions coming over back to assets, and then, as it were, to do kind of stages, as it were, trial climate change out with the new proposals without the concessions, and then see how that works before then introducing concessions. Does that make sense? And just to see, because it might be that those concessions overwhelm assets, and it might be helpful to alleviate that, and you might find a natural path back to climate change committee because it's on that land. The only other suggestion I had as well, which I emailed through to Georgia and Clark earlier on, was there is in some places an increase in members for the committees. Now I was just wondering about councillors that are kind of time poor, like me. If there are gaps in other committees, so you're not getting your full quota of 10, whether there could be a flexi role for councillors to come along, maybe on a reduced amount, a reduced commitment to attend those meetings, instead of 4 per year, maybe 2 per year. So for me, it'd be a good way of trying to get some experience of different committees. And that way it would also help if there were people unwell, sickness, or you would have maybe a full quota of people for that committee.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Councillor Hunter?
Yeah, thank you. I'll just think of what Councillor Matthews was just saying about doing flexi roles, job shares on committees. I'm not sure what the legality is on that, so that's something you're probably going to have to look into if you want to do that, go down that avenue. I've never heard that before. You're either on the committee or you're not. So I'd like to see if the Council Clerk can look into that with Georgia. That'd be great. One of the biggest things we've spent the last year or two, communication. Internally, externally, between councillors, between staff, councillors, all the interactions. But where's that dealt with in here? Because I can't see it. And I think that bit has been ignored. And then it's totally delegated, we don't need committees for that. Or are we going to do these special, long, extraordinary full councils that go on for 3 hours that don't actually get anywhere? So I'd be interested to know where that aspect of is going to be dealt with. Because at the moment, it's not in any of the committee structures at the moment. So if you've got any ideas, was it being resolved anyway? Council training, anything to do with councils, it's not really written down anywhere. Just being too, it doesn't come under personnel, but that's to do with staffing, obviously. So I'd like to know any issues to do with councillors, where that's going to be dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I still worry about the golf committee. I still feel it should be still a standalone. Probably still incorporate Seaford Head Estate, but keep it to that area. Because I can see because we have representation from the golf course. It's, you know, which they do give very good reports, which we are welcome to comment on. But I just feel to have the golf course and Seaford Head Estate, all that area, and probably where did I see it? The Hope Steps as well. That area all together in one committee. I can see that the golf committee will start being a lengthy meeting. Just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Northern. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, along with what others have said as well, that maybe we need to trial some of this for a year and just see how it goes. You know, make some tweaks that's possibly been suggested. But I think we need to just give this a go, see how it works. If it doesn't work, just maybe we just propose, note this, we adopt this just for that 1 year and see how we go. And if we have a review after so many months, or just we'll do it at the end of the year and see how we go. But yeah, I think it's time for change. I'm slightly concerned, obviously, some of the numbers. It's getting people to actually put themselves forward for all these different things as well. There's a lot of commitments. Obviously, we know planning and highways. There's 6 or 7 of us, depending on who's able to come and everything else. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Newman. Do we have any other questions, or do we have any second questions? Are you?
If I may, just quickly.
Yeah.
Just having listened to the various contributions, starting to think along the lines of sort of a sports, open spaces and nature type committee. Still the sort of running thread of climate change. You know, it sort of depends if you go by people's skills, I suppose, or by geography, and those two things don't match up, do they? You know, if I was sort of saying, you know, I mean, you may not want me to, but if I was going to chair a committee and climate change was gone over to finance, I'd be really torn between one or the other, or even just which one to sit on. I think keeping Seaford Head Estate together makes a lot of sense. I wonder about the commercial aspect of the golf, whether that would sit better with community services and just leave any of the sort of nature land management stuff in that committee. And likewise, talking about concessions and stuff and sort of any solely commercial aspects put to community services, and then things like grounds maintenance, which we're going to have a lot coming up. In terms of our parks, but also we've got, and I see it's under assets and facilities at the moment, but grass verges, including urban. I mean, that's got a working group spawned out of climate change at the moment, and I can see those things kind of coming together in terms of their synergies. So I'm sort of wondering if, you know, a bit more of a tact towards that might be something to try. And might possibly be a middle way in what we've been talking about tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Can I come back?
You're most welcome.
Just to try and pick up a few of the points. Obviously, as has been said, you can cut the cake in many different ways. The difficulty of putting Seaford Head Estate as one is that you've got the difficulty of, do you include the assets in it, like the golf course, and the climate change element of the nature reserve, and the open space of the grassland, and the asset of the view as an asset? It's like, where do you split that? So I think the proposals were put together with a sort of a mindset of the assets that are more commercialised type assets as one thing, and the areas that are more likely to affect climate change, which are open spaces, the golf course, how that relates to the NNR if that's what the council decide to adopt, and parks and that sort of area. They're the things that tend to be the things that are discussed at climate change. That was my thinking. But obviously, as it mentions at 3.7, the list of areas of responsibility is intended to be indicative and not for the full council to approve at this meeting. But to be formalised by full council at a later date, ahead of the next municipal year. So it could be that you agree the headings of the committees with the areas of responsibility to follow, or you could agree all of it in one go. And in terms of Councillor Matthews' point, obviously I responded to you earlier, but so other councillors are aware, technically all committee members already do have some flex in terms of the fact that they can offer apologies and arrange substitutes to go in their place whenever they need to. There's a danger around advocating any sort of formalisation of a flexible position on a committee, because there's a danger that if lots of councillors decide on one meeting to use that flex and not turn up, we run the risk of it becoming incorrect, or so few members turn up that there's an area of issue around whether it's a properly constituted meeting. And that undermines the legitimacy of the decision making if there's a lot of councillors decide not to come to the same meeting. We can obviously endeavour to be more clear with councillors and reiterate that it's perfectly acceptable at any committee meeting to arrange a substitute so that you don't need to come to every meeting if that's a problem. But obviously we recognise that councillors are juggling a lot of responsibilities, and so it's difficult for everyone to commit to lots of different committees. So I think that was more or less the answer that I gave you. It's a paraphrased version of what I emailed you.
Thank you, yeah. Not had a chance to read it yet.
The other thing I'd say is that obviously I've only attended one of each committee so far since I've been in role, and so I've only got one meeting to compare this to for each of the committees. But what I've noticed is that at various times different things go to the top of the list and become something we talk about a lot. Hurdy's House, for example, has been talked about at every meeting for the last however long, but in due course it probably won't be anymore. And so things change how much they appear on agendas. And it might be that for a few months there's lots of focus on the Seaford Headcourt estate, and then it's not for a while, and then something else might become. And so there's always going to be an element of flex of how busy each committee is. And it's very difficult because of that to then determine which should be in what. But we've tried to make it so that there's almost like an equal split of significant things in each committee, in the hope that they all run roughly around the same sort of length of time and have the same amount of content. And the other thing I'll say is that I attended the Golf and Review Committee the other day, and my feedback was there was a very small number of councillors present, and it was a relatively short meeting. I mean, we finished before 8 p.m, and that was including the budgeting. So there is an argument that there's not very much in that committee at the moment when compared with the likes of community services. So it's, and that's the feedback I've had from other people as well, that the Golf and the View Committee, particularly since the Views operation is no longer a Seaford Town Council issue, has a very small area of responsibility. I think I've tried to answer as many as I can.
You have indeed. Councillor.
Thank you very much. You obviously haven't answered about the communication. Now, what we don't really do is in our meetings where we don't really make a decision on which was happening in the summer, Madam Mayor. As you're well aware, the extraordinary meeting we had, was it late July? 4 items. Have you looked at it yet, Town Clerk? Former Town Clerk. What we don't want is lots of communication meetings clogging up the full councils. I didn't find that was very, very useful. And that's all to do with what I was saying earlier. I don't know how you intend to address communication issues. I'm not very happy with no response at all from yourself.
I'm not really sure, if I'm honest, what you mean in terms of how that relates to a committee structure.
Well, maybe we need to talk about that outside of this particular meeting. Okay. Because obviously it crept into various full council meetings over the last year or so, and other committees as well, and away from committee structures as well, the communication. How are you doing it with council issues generally?
Through you, Chair, maybe I can add
Yeah,
a bit
go on,
more to it,
please.
because obviously I was here at
Yeah,
the
I know, I'm aware.
So I think what we've talked about is kind of utilising that general purposes bit of F&GP. So
Yeah.
general purposes would encompass things like democratic services, civic services, the office, communications between councillors and officers, our public engagement. So F&GP would wrap up kind of the general bits that don't sit specifically within any committee. So to provide the examples of what came through full council last July, they would all be coming through finance and general purposes.
Sort of councillor finance training is all in the F&GP now, so that's still carried on. It's obviously not mentioned, written down in that list. So maybe that could be expanded a bit on the items there. So it does include councillors. Otherwise, it's almost like the councillors don't need more of an oversight in this sort of setup, if you see what I mean. So obviously staff included other personnel, but maybe that could be included somewhere a bit more explicitly.
Sure. I'm more than happy.
No, I know, because for interest, you may find that interesting watching that meeting, but anyway, that's another conversation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Councillor Gibbon.
I have just one item to note, and I've mentioned it before. It's probably controversial. You may or may not like it. I say we abolish the planning committee. Planning is already undertaken by Lewis District. Seaford has no authority, so that is one thing I would like to see removed.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to ask for any other questions. I want to make a comment myself. Are there any other questions at all? Okay, I want to respond to Councillor Honeyman. I thought it was really useful to come up with communication.
Yeah.
From where I'm sitting, I saw communication as a policy, but because the policy was never resolved, it has been weaving through continuously for months, and it is a very, very large policy. It covers so many different areas. So I welcome George's explanation and suggestion of where it might go, but I understand that there does have to be a description for that, and we have to be very clear about it, because it then helps us. I think the way that we tried to address that item and others during this year was to have task and finish groups of short councillors groups, and then take things back to full council. It wasn't a bad idea at the time. In fact, the two groups that I was on, were pretty efficient. We didn't come to total resolution, and then we've changed things since. However, if there was a proper committee where these things could be debated, I think it's more secure. I think it's a better communication in itself. So, I would actually agree with that. In terms of what you've all been saying, and before we do go to the recommendations, I am feeling, given that we are not full today, we are lacking 6 councillors, and I'm also very aware that when we did have the meeting in November to discuss the restructuring, and the committee restructure as well was within that. Again, we were not full. There were quite a lot of absentees, and so that leads me to think that councillors haven't had this opportunity to have a good discussion, which is why these things are coming up today. I picked up on something that the interim town clerk said, which was one could note and look at the committee titles, but then wait and go back and change what's going underneath them, maybe having further discussion. It is a possibility, I think. We are discussing other things later, but the committee structure and the final crossing of the T's and dotting the I's could still go into the new year without any major concern for us. Because I'm feeling, I see half the room saying one thing basically and half the room saying the other. So I'm kind of thinking we're not quite ready to not explore a bit more. And in fact, innovative ideas are coming through, and they're ideas I haven't heard before. So even though I knew that there was a comment time to go back to the interim town clerk after we'd had our full discussion, an informal discussion, we hadn't heard those comments until today, and one might want to take them on board. So I'm minded to note to take the recommendations separately and to go through each of them, and possibly to note the contents of the report, but then if number 2, if you would either want to change that, or if you want to just read it and vote on it, and if it doesn't go through, then we can amend it. It's up to you. But and someone can propose one of the ideas that's come through, because quite a few of you, as well as the interim town clerk, has proposed a process. So I'm not proposing a decision. I'm proposing a process for getting better to that decision, I think. And I know that Councillor Taylor raised the idea of CCMG. I think we have a problem with that, with the fact that we don't have delegated powers in CCMG. It's not a bad place to discuss things, but unfortunately it wouldn't include all of you. So you may come up with another proposal, but I'm all ears. Okay, so I would first like to say let's move to the first recommendation. Do I have a proposer to note the contents of the report? Okay, so we have Councillor, okay, we have two councillors. Who went first? I can't remember. Okay, yourself, Councillor I'm sorry, I just not remembered your name. I'm so sorry. This is me.
Don't worry, Mary, it's fine.
It's fine. And Councillor Gorman is seconded. Thank you very much for that. All in favour?
Santa Claus.
Yes, it was. That was kind of probably why. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay. That's the first one out of the way. Thank you very much. Okay, second. So at the moment, the recommendation states to adopt the proposed committee structure and that this will take effect for 2025 and 2026 municipal year. So it is only going for 1 year. So do I have a proposer for that?
Can I propose that with some amendments?
You can,
We have to vote on the amendment.
but we have to vote on the amendment separately.
Yes.
Yeah?
That's fine.
So do you want to go to the amendment?
So obviously Councillor Bristow would like it to be Climate Action Committee. So the Golf, Open Spaces and Climate Action, not Climate Change.
Yeah.
And actually also then to remove the public toilets and concessions from the golf and open spaces and put them back into assets and facilities for the next year.
Okay, have you got that? I know, Georgia. So, shall we vote on the amendment?
Can you put councillor issues please on the FGP as well then? That's not explicit enough at the moment. And where are you going to put communication as well?
I think it would be better if we did one amendment at a time.
Can we do one amendment at a time? Okay.
Might add to Liz's amendment, Councillor Borman's amendment, if she would let me. Thank you
Well,
for
possibly.
thank you for the first part, which is very useful. I know we're going to be deciding the finer points later, but I do think that grass verges and grounds maintenance would make sense to come to the golf open spaces and climate change, given that grass verges is effectively already under climate change. And I think that's quite a big chunk, so I'd sort of have that as part 3, something to add on if you're okay with that. To lump it.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Georgia, we have 3 parts to the amendment.
Yeah, just read out the amendment.
Yeah,
You seconding that?
Okay, I'll second. Yeah, I'll second that.
So,
The amendment, just
the member, Councillor Borman has proposed the first amendment, which is to call it climate action instead of climate change. So that's your first amendment. Seconded by?
Yep.
Yes, Councillor Bristow? All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. So that's the first amendment. The second amendment was to remove the public toilets and concessions
from Goscar.
from golf and back into assets. Who would like to propose that amendment? Okay, proposed by Councillor Bristow, seconded by Councillor Rutland. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. The third amendment, which is to remove grass verges and grounds maintenance from assets and take it into golf. Who would like to propose that? Councillor Bristow, who would like to second? Councillor Taylor, all in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. So now we have all the...
You have to put my amendment. My amendment
number 4.
Is to amend to add to the FGP communication issues, ongoing communication issues. You may be able to want to rephrase that when you want to, and also the councillor issues as well.
call it,
including training and so on.
should we call it council and communications? Or
Well, just, yeah, but communications is wider than just between councils, it's wider, it includes staff, interaction and so on, communicators generally.
Do you have a suggestion?
I wonder whether we do communications and engagement, and if we do democratic services
Yeah, that would
within
include
kind of the job descriptions that covers
council
councillor
issues.
support.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Communication engagement's fine. That includes all permutations, combinations, doesn't it?
So
Right,
what's your
do you want to read it
sentence?
out?
So it would be including communications and engagement and democratic and councillor services within F&GP.
Thanks very much. Do we have a proposer for that?
Yeah,
Councillor Richard Borman and a second by Councillor Rutland. Thank you very much. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much for the amendments. We now have 4 amendments for the recommendation 2. So if I just read it out again and say and amendments, are you happy with that? To adopt,
Sorry, I did mention getting rid of planning, and apart from a few
Oh,
sniggers,
you did.
nobody actually commented on that.
Mm.
So I'd be interested just to hear what people's thoughts are on that.
Are you,
as to why.
are you proposing that as an amendment for it to be voted
Not
on?
necessarily, no, given the,
Yeah. Do you think, Councillor, thank you, that because we have amendments here about shifting things around, but it's possible that we might be going towards another discussion, it feels like, that would come into that other discussion? Or are you worried if we accept this, that we're accepting planning?
yes.
Yeah.
The only way to take it out would be to do it as a amendment.
Sorry.
You choose chair.
Councillor Taylor.
I completely understand the frustration around planning, and we're in the middle of one of those situations ourselves in Bishopstone Ward. It is a recommendation. The planning committee does not have a decision. It can make it makes a recommendation to the district councillors. The power all lies with the district councillors. However, I don't think this is the time to change our processes when I think in the wider community, government, that is central government, I think we're going to see massive changes coming in relation to planning. And we risk changing around what we're doing and then finding out that something's come in from outside that we haven't really anticipated because it's a hot potato currently. So I would suggest we review it again in 6 months and sit tight, but that's my view.
Okay, so Councillor Rutland.
Do you mind if I don't say that? From what I understand, your reason for wanting to lose that committee is it's impotent, it's toothless, it doesn't actually make any decisions.
Yeah.
But what it does do is make recommendations, and if it is all just simply delegated to Lewis to get on with it without any input or recommendations from us locally, then we've lost that voice. And while we can't necessarily tell them what to do, we still have a voice of what's important in this town to us because we live here. And if that decision is taken for people who don't live here, don't really care what's going on about, they've got other agendas and things, if that voice is gone, we won't get it back. So for that reason, I understand your reasons for wanting to lose it because you think it seems it doesn't do anything. But what it does do, it does give us a voice, and I think that voice is important. So for those reasons, I would say, let's leave it in. We are going to review all this in 12 months' time. Maybe in 12 months' time, planning will be in a very different position to what it is now, the way the government is going on. But for the moment, we've got plenty enough changes going on. And it's not change for the sake of change. I think a lot of these changes are very, very necessary. I commend the clerk for his proposals and his work on this because I think it's well overdue and very needed. But for those reasons, I would actually leave it in for now, because what we don't want to do is lose that voice. That makes sense?
Well, it does. I mean, I could argue back that the district councillors are there as our voice, but I completely understand what Councillor Taylor has said, and I will accept that with a review in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Duval. Thank you very much, Councillor Rutland.
You're very welcome.
Okay, let's remember where we are. So we have 4 amendments. Okay, 4 amendments, and I'm about to read the second recommendation, and I'm going to say with 4 amendments at the end of it. To adopt the proposed committee structure, and that this will take effect for the 2025 and 2026 municipal year with the 4 amendments suggested. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Borman. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rutland. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Now, we have the third recommendation. To endorse the actions to be taken by officers to prepare for and implement the new structure as set out within the report. Okay, so to endorse the actions to be taken by officers to prepare for and implement the new structure as set out within the report. Do we have a proposer? Councillor Borman. Do we have a seconder? Councillor...
Point of order here.
Yes.
We did talk about it coming back one more time, 21st of January. Could that still be an option if we need to tip one more time? No, I don't know if it's going to mess up anything. Is it 21st of
23rd of
January? Sorry.
The agenda is already quite large for the 23rd of January full council meeting, so the plan was that this would be brought back to the something of March, toward the end of March, and it will be brought back in the form of the revised scheme of delegation, which will then create the terms of reference for each of these committees. But at the 23rd of January you'll receive the draft meeting timetable as per the revised committee structure.
Okay. So the minutes won't show the detail. What we talked about tonight, not really, does it? It doesn't really do that.
So through you, Chair, I've captured an overview of the discussion.
Yeah. Okay, I'm happy with just accepting them. I want that going back to full council again.
Yeah, okay, so we're still endorsing the actions to be taken by officers to prepare for and implement the new structure as set out within the report. Do we have a proposer?
I was actually just going to propose a quick amendment to that, an addition, which would be to put in context the new committee in terms of our council's strategic objectives, because what to me is missing is that sort of overview of this is how it maps on and this is how it helps us, enables us to achieve those objectives in the time that we've got. It seems pretty good from what I'm feeling, but I'd really like those 2 things overlaid and just presented as part of that when it comes back, if that would be agreeable by officers and councillors.
March, you're talking March?
Yeah.
We can certainly try and see which strategic objectives each of the committees will seek to approve, and link up where appropriate.
Thank you.
Okay, so that really will come within that.
Okay.
Okay, are you happy with it coming within that
Yeah.
sentence and being understood by the officers? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to move to ask for a proposer for the recommendation number 3. Councillor Rutland and seconder Councillor Borman, very active down that end of the table. Do we have all those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much, everyone. Let's move on. Okay, so agenda item 6. This is to look at the committee chair appointment for finance and general purposes, and to seek any nominations for the appointment to the role of chair of finance and general purposes. I'd like to invite interim town clerk just to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. So Councillor Ruth Sturton has communicated with me that she wishes to resign from being the Chair of Finance and General Purposes. Councillor Horrow, who is currently the Vice Chair of that committee, has said he's happy to continue on as the Vice Chair, but not to step up as the Chair. So to that end, we need to elect a new Chair for the committee. In addition, there are some vacancies on that committee, and so councillors are invited to put their names forward if they wish to do so. And just to clarify, this is for the remainder of this current municipal year on the Finance and General Purposes Committee, and is not relevant to the previous discussion about what will happen after May 25.
Thank you, Clark. So we have two things to think about, and one might come before the other. It may well be that we might want to offer, first of all, whether anyone wants to propose to add themselves to the committee, as there are 2 spaces, I think. Are there?
I believe so,
2
yes.
spaces on there. Because if they're then accepted onto the committee, we have a wider pool from those then that might wish to be chair. So are we happy to take it in that order? If I just ask the question, if anyone would like to propose to put themselves to join the Finance and General Purposes Committee. At the moment,
I can read out who's
yes,
on it.
thank you very much.
So councillors Ali, councillor Borman, councillor Buchanan, councillor Dubas, councillor Horrow, who is the Vice Chair, councillor Walraven and councillor Wearmouth.
Do we have anyone else that would like to join this committee?
I'm joking. But I'd lighten the mood.
Anyone at all? Councillor Sturton, are you putting yourself forward?
I'm willing to accept this civic duty if my fellow councillors wish me in that role.
Okay. Councillor Matthews, you popped your hand up there.
I did. I think because it's for the rest of the financial year as opposed to the full year.
Yeah. It's until May, until we start. Yeah. Okay. So we have a proposal here for Councillor Sturton and Councillor Matthews to join. We could do one at a time. Okay. So I'm going to propose that Councillor Sturton joins Finance and General Purposes. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Dubar, thank you very much. All in favour? Any of those against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Welcome to Finance and General Purposes, Councillor Sturton. I'm going to also propose for Councillor Matthews to join Finance and General Purposes. Do I have a second? Councillor Henman. Okay, all those in favour? All those against? And any abstentions? Okay, so we now have a full complement of Finance and General Purposes Committee. Congratulations to committee. You now need to elect a chair, and you do need to elect a chair for this committee. You have a very large agenda over the next couple of months going forward. It's very exciting.
If I can just add,
Yes.
Committee.
Councillor Horrow was planning on chairing the meeting that's going to happen next week, which is the biggest meeting of FGP's year. So by taking on the chair, I'm sure that Councillor Horrow would probably be prepared to continue to chair that, because it would be, otherwise you're going to have about a week's notice to chair the meeting. So if you were putting yourself forward, you wouldn't have to necessarily become it next Thursday, if that helps to allay minds.
Okay, so we would now need to see if anyone would like to put themselves forward. Councillor Borman?
I'll put myself forward as it's only till May.
As it's only till May. Councillor Dubar?
I'll put myself forward.
And you'll put yourself forward. Right, we're going to go Councillor... It's fine, we're going to go Councillor Borman first and then Councillor Dubar. Is anyone else like to put themselves forward? Okay, so I'm going to take one at a time. Councillor Borman, you've proposed yourself. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Borman? Councillor Walraven. All those in favour? 3, 4, okay. 5. Yes, you can vote for yourself. All those against? 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And any abstentions?
Yeah, but, sorry, I'm just following the process at the moment. Okay.
Any you're an abstention?
No, I'm going to vote against.
Oh, right.
Six.
Sorry, have you got the numbers now?
Yeah, so that motion hasn't been carried.
Right, okay. Let's go to Councillor Dubar. Councillor Dubar, do we have a seconder for Councillor Dubar? Councillor Taylor. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Okay, so at the moment, Councillor Dubar has been welcomed as Chair of Finance and General Purposes. Merry Christmas.
I could just add,
Yes.
Councillor Debay, if you could communicate with Councillor Horror about next week's meeting, just so that there's a plan for who's going to chair that, and if you could let officers know, that would be great.
Okay, we've now come to the end, funnily enough, of my items, except for the fact that I need to go to agenda item 7, exclusion of press and public. So, exclusion of press and public, the Chair will move that in accordance with Public Bodies Admission to Meetings Act 1960, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during the discussion on the remaining items of business for the reasons I've set out below. The resolutions of the items will be recorded publicly in the minutes of this meeting. Can I seek a seconder for exclusion of press and public? Thank you, Councillor Bristow. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. 6 minutes past.
Good to see everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care now.
Thank you. Can we just mention something to you before you have a